You are actively broadcasting your willingness to be exploited every time you soften your tone to keep the peace. Beneath every polite smile and compliant nod lies a quiet confession of fear that predators smell from across the room. Niceness is rarely an act of pure altruism, it is usually a desperate defensive tax paid by the weak to buy temporary immunity from the strong. But nature does not reward compliance. It penalizes it. Consider how wild canids determine hierarchy within a pack. They do not test the aggressive leader immediately, they test the animal that yields too quickly, the one that lowers its head before a challenge is even issued. Human social structures operate on this exact biological blueprint. When you over-apologize, yield your ground, and smooth over every awkward silence, you are not diffusing tension. You are issuing an invitation. You are telling everyone in your vicinity that your boundaries are negotiable and your territory is ripe for acquisition. Think about the quiet person in every corporate office who never rocks the boat, always agrees with the prevailing opinion, and volunteers for the tasks nobody else wants. Everyone praises their work ethic while quietly bypassing them for promotions. Why? Because safety is invisible, and compliant people are treated like furniture. You cannot reward a chair, you simply use it. The moment you decide to become frictionless to avoid conflict, you render yourself strategically weightless. Cardinal Mazarin, who ruled France through absolute stealth while his rivals tore each other apart in public, understood a fundamental truth about human aggression. He observed that people do not attack the strong out of malice, they attack the yielding out of opportunity. Aggression is a lazy force. It always flows along the path of least resistance. When you make yourself that path, you absorb the friction of everyone else's ambitions. You might believe your agreeable nature keeps you safe from the political games played around you, but protection bought through submission is an illusion that evaporates the second a crisis hits. A predator does not spare a compliant target out of pity, they simply consume it faster to save energy for harder prey. What happens, then, the moment you stop paying that defensive tax? What occurs when you let the room sit in an uncomfortable silence instead of rushing to fill it with nervous pleasantries? When someone stares right through your smile without blinking, they are stripping away the social contract that keeps polite society from tearing itself apart. They are refusing to fill the awkward air you carefully manufactured. In that exact standoff, the person who speaks first loses the leverage of mystery. Most people treat silence as an accidental void that needs immediate repair with nervous chatter, but master strategists treat it as structural concrete. When you stop filling the gaps in a conversation, you construct an artificial hierarchy where everyone else becomes a forced laborer trying to excavate your thoughts. Think of how Cardinal Richelieu managed the French court. He didn't issue threats or parade his authority through the halls of Paris. Instead, he simply sat back, listened twice as much as he spoke, and let silence do the heavy lifting of intimidation. When a courtier came to him with elaborate excuses, Richelieu would offer nothing more than a slow, unreadable nod. That empty space acts like a psychological mirror. Without any data points or emotional reactions to anchor themselves to, the people standing across from you stop seeing you entirely. They start seeing their own hidden sins, unpaid debts, and deepest insecurities reflected off your quiet exterior. They project their worst fears onto your emptiness because human biology abhors a vacuum. Here is where the architecture of silence flips inward, and you must examine your own terrifying habits. You think you are keeping secrets when you stay quiet at a dinner party or hold your tongue in a tense board meeting, but notice what happens to your own pulse when the room goes dead. You start sweating. You replay every word you said yesterday, searching for flaws. You are not just withholding data from them, your own silence is slowly interrogating you. The moment you withhold information to manipulate the room, you become a prisoner of your own omission. You have to remember every lie of omission, track every blank expression, and police your own face for micro-expressions. The hunter ends up trapped in the blind they built for the game. Look at how corporate executives survive hostile takeovers. They don't leak counter-strategies to the press. They go completely dark. Competitors spend millions hiring consultants to decode a blank press release, while the quiet executive sits in an empty office drinking cold coffee, watching the market tear itself apart trying to solve an equation that has no numbers. The brilliance of withholding isn't that you are hiding a master plan. The brilliance is that they assume a master plan exists simply because you refuse to defend yourself. Yet, there is a dangerous tipping point that most strategists miss until it is too late. What happens when your silence becomes so absolute, so chillingly consistent, that people stop trying to figure you out altogether and simply lock the door behind them, leaving you completely alone in the dark? When you remain completely silent while an opponent tries to justify a bad position, you are not just waiting them out, you are watching them construct the very argument that will destroy them. The quiet moment in a high-stakes negotiation works because human beings abhor a vacuum. They will fill it with their own insecurities, talking themselves right out of the concessions they came in to protect. But letting them talk themselves into a corner is only the setup. The true mastery of social architecture begins when you stop reacting to what people say and start acting as their executioner by using their own nature against them. Think of how Cardinal Richelieu managed the French nobility. He rarely issued direct commands or engaged in petty court arguments. Instead, he simply mirrored the ambitions, vanities, and paranoia of his rivals back to them with terrifying precision, allowing their own unchecked desires to orchestrate their political ruin. Here is where the dynamic completely shifts inside your own head. You believe you are studying everyone else, analyzing their flaws, mapping their moves across the board like an objective grandmaster. Yet this entire exercise in strategic observation is actually a confession. The traits you notice fastest in other people, the subtle betrayals, the hidden agendas, the quiet machinations, are almost always the ones you are already fluent in yourself. Innocence does not recognize calculation. When you spend your life decoding the hidden motives of those around you, you are merely looking into a glass that reflects your own practiced cynicism. The greatest trap ever laid for you is not the one set by your adversaries, but the one you set for yourself by assuming everyone is playing the exact same ruthless game you are. You survive the battlefield only to realize you have become a permanent prisoner of war. He who fights with monsters should look to it that he himself does not become a monster. And if you gaze long into an abyss, the abyss also gazes into you.